I think the Guzzi, oh dear, oh geez, that was close.
Folks, this one has been a long time coming. I have never ridden a Moto Guzzi on this channel ever before. Actually, ever in my motorcycling career. Somehow, the esteemed Italian brand has always slipped under my radar, but now we finally have this Moto Guzzi V7 Special here at Yamanoob HQ. It's provided to us as a loaner bike by Eurocycle, so hit the link down below and check them out for all of your sweet Euro bike needs. You can actually pick up yourself a European motorcycle and they will ship it directly to your door. A lot of our giveaway bikes actually this entire year have been purchased through them. We trust them, you should too. Check them out in the description down below. Now, Moto Guzzi has slipped under our radar, but that, again, is not for very good reason. It's just been one of those things where we've always been kind of missing each other, like ships in the night. But Moto Guzzi is a really cool brand, and I have a lot to say about them. They've actually been in production for 100 continuous years. They're currently owned by the Piaggio Group, so a lot of the stuff that you see on Moto Guzzis are actually starting to trickle down from Aprilia's and other Vespa products as well. Their new bike, the Mandello, actually has active aero wings, which is really cool. But this bike right here is what Moto Guzzi is known best for. These kind of transverse V-twin, longitudinal crankshaft, really old school, authentic, vibrant motorcycles. Now, in case you didn't know, Moto Guzzi has that long storied history. One of their most amazing motorcycles actually is from 1955. It's the Moto Guzzi Ottocilindri. It was an 8-cylinder, liquid-cooled, 172 mile per hour missile that Moto Guzzi made back in the day that I think we're gonna have to do a whole dedicated video to because it's kind of the Turbo Busa of its time. Really, really cool machine. But this V7 Special is kind of Moto Guzzi celebrating the history of the V7. It was first introduced in 1967 as Italy's first big motorcycle. Up until that point, decades prior to World War II, Italy was just making these tiny little single-cylinder motorcycles, and Moto Guzzi came out with the V7, with this classic flying V, not like the guitar, no cool shredding flying V solos happening, but this flying V right here was that first big bike from Italy. Now, it was originally a 700cc, and this one here is an 853cc air-cooled V-twin motor, making about 67 horsepower and 53 foot-pounds of torque. It's actually shaft driven because that's the way it works with the whole longitudinal V-twin in the wrong position whole situation. Wet weight on this machine is a little over 450 pounds if I remember correctly, and this V7 Special has the spoked wheels, the twin analog gauges, and a lot of the other features you would find on a traditional classic styled motorcycle. Again, air-cooled steel frame. The frame here actually reminds me more of a Sportster than a Bonneville. It kind of goes up to the neck here, really, really tight at an angle. And this thing is kind of like Italy's Bonneville. You can kind of think of this as a really cool, authentically styled and classic feeling motorcycle. So I've ridden Bonnevilles, I've ridden Sportsters, I've ridden Royal Enfields, so there's only one thing left to do, and that's to go ride this motorcycle. Come with me.
Alright guys, swinging a leg over the Moto Guzzi V7 Special. It sits a lot like a Bonneville, a Royal Enfield, one of those standard styled bikes. Really nice approachable seat height. I got a very pronounced bend in my legs. 5'11", 32-inch inseam are my specs. I would wager this motorcycle has about a 30-inch seat height. I can't remember exactly because I did not do all my homework and I forgot the seat height, unfortunately. Really narrow gas tank, and it's super cool as you sit here. You can see the top of the heads on this motorcycle. Twin analog gauges as mentioned in the shop. Very nice amenable seating position, and a pretty simple little gas gauge setup over here. Gas light rather, neutral, check engine, turn indicators as well. Actually has a couple modes here. You can actually do a very simple traction control system, if I recall correctly, on this motorcycle. Clock, you have a couple different settings here, odometer. Lots of cool features on this bike actually for the type of very simple kind of motorcycle that it is. But of course, the coolest feature about this bike is this funky transverse mounted V-twin. You don't see these a lot nowadays, and this is pretty unique to Moto Guzzi. So if we flick the ignition on here, park it into neutral, get our brakes on because we're on a bit of an incline, and we'll start it up. Watch what happens here. Oh, it shimmies and shakes to life, doesn't it? chock full of character, this motorcycle is. That's going to be one of my defining features on it. Let's get a quick little rev going. I'll actually watch you as I wick this. Watch this. It falls over, brings back to the other side. Very similar to a BMW Boxer Twin. Not as pronounced because the cylinders aren't going completely horizontal. They're going vertical like this. So let's get a sound check really quick. It's actually pretty zippy, honestly. I expected it to be a lot more lazy. But yeah, it's actually pretty nice. Gearbox is okay. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we're actually going to go out there, do some slow speed, show you guys, and then we'll get it out on the road and have some fun with it. Let's go. So slow speeds on the Moto Guzzi are pretty much exactly what you would expect. This motorcycle has a very upright seating position. The weight carries itself very low. It's a motorcycle that you can get along with very, very well, going in a nice slow speed manner. As you'll see here, you can get your weight over on the side here, very easily crank it over and do yourself little slow speed maneuvers here. It's actually a very, very nice little motorcycle to ride in the slow speeds. Let's crank it over all the way here. See if we can get a nice tight little U-turn here. Slow it down. Yeah, it's actually very agreeable in the slow speed stuff. Given these kind of, you know, old school easy-going rider triangle, you can find yourself doing parking lot maneuvers very, very easily with this motorcycle. I honestly think this makes a pretty good beginner bike. It's a little torque heavy, and it's a little heavy in general, and it's a little expensive. This motorcycle in this Grigio Casual colorway, which is specific to the V7 Special and not the V7 Stone, which is a little bit different, is going to find yourself paying $9,490 off the showroom floor, which is a pretty good amount of money. You know, that's over $10,000 for this motorcycle, so you're definitely competing with the likes of the Triumph Bonneville. But I'm happy to report that this is definitely beginner friendly, definitely a good motorcycle if you're kind of not so familiar with the nature of riding motorcycles. Now, slow speed conquered. Let's talk through the rest of this motorcycle. One of the things that stands out to me on this bike is the nature of the throttle and the engine. So different, very characterful. This is what I believe Harley and Royal Enfield people feel when they ride their motorcycles, but this bike actually has it. This bike is actually different. A lot of those other bikes are pretty damn similar to other things that you'll go out and ride, but this motorcycle, the relationship between throttle and engine here is pretty dynamic and pretty unique. It's sort of like a mashup between a Royal Enfield and a BMW and a Bonneville. It's like a little sampler dish of all those great classic styled motorcycles, all done in its own unique way. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like this motorcycle is the fastest thing in the world, the coolest thing in the world, because you see here, we roll on, you'll actually see a shift light pop open. That's a cool feature. Better shift because it's a Moto Guzzi. You don't know if it's going to blow up or not, right? Just kidding. But being that it's not the fastest, it's not the craziest motorcycle that you can go out and buy, you know, this is a bike that you're designed to just cruise around with, have some fun with, enjoy the open road with. It's a motorcycle that elicits those kind of feelings of fun and adventure. You're meant to just have a good time with this thing. Now, I've got to talk about the gearbox a little bit, because this thing, with its kind of sloppy gearbox, you really got to press down to find the gear you want to be in. It's not really that intuitive. It's not like a Kawasaki gearbox, for example. It's very snickety, very positive, or a Triumph gearbox. It's very positive and snickety. This thing, unfortunately, is just a little not so great between the gears. I honestly, sometimes I pull away from a stoplight and I'm like, oh, it was actually in second gear and not in first gear. I somehow didn't stamp it down into the right gear. So a little disappointed on the gearbox front with the Moto Guzzi V7 Special here. But I'm happy to report that kind of cruising on a highway like this, doing the thing that this motorcycle is probably most often going to be doing, very nice. Very compliant, smooth and soft suspension, exactly what I would have expected. Very comfortable seat, by the way. I know you guys saw this seat in the shop. I'm happy to report this seat's very comfortable, nicely padded. I could definitely see myself doing big miles on this motorcycle, not a problem at all. I like the feeling of the throttle, you know? It's a very direct throttle, cable actuated, which is really great. I couldn't imagine this motorcycle being any different way. It's got a nice cable throttle, very direct feeling, and that engine's got such a unique feel to it, man. This 853cc transverse mounted V-twin has got a lot going for it, I gotta say. I like the torque on it. You know, it redlines at about 6,500 RPM, so that's not going to blow anyone's hair back. But it's a motorcycle that, you know, you can really get along with. You can really feel the torque as you power up the gears here. It's definitely not, it's not even close to being, you know, a fast bike or anything like that. But I think in the realm of Bonnevilles and, you know, Royal Enfields and Sportsters, it is totally adequate in what the power it delivers. It's not a motorcycle that you feel the absolute need and urge for speed, because it's not communicating that to you. You know, some motorcycles, like a Ninja 650 or something, you're kind of left a little bit disappointed because you're like, well, I was expecting a little bit more speed. But, you know, this bike, it's just so beautiful and it's so cool looking. You don't really mind the fact that you're not getting a lot of performance. If you want a modern look but modern performance, you know, Triumph sells you a Bonneville T120 or a Thruxton R. You can have a motorcycle that looks classic, or a, yeah, if you want to go crazy, an MP Agusta Super Veloce. But this is not that type of bike. This is the type of bike that it is designed to be cruised with, enjoyed with, and overall is a good package. Another feature about this motorcycle is this shaft drive. So transverse V-twin shaft drive. It is a very different experience from the throttle if you're used to a conventional Japanese parallel twin inline four chain driven motorcycle. This motorcycle is not going to feel like that, and it provides a very unique experience. Every time I grab down a gear, I feel the whole thing slap to that next gear. It's kind of fun, like right there. When you grab a gear down and blip that throttle, the bike actually gives you a nice little slap from side to side, which is very unique. Non-adjustable suspension, right side up forks, as you guys are seeing over here, so you're not going to be able to adjust any of the settings. But again, I'm happy to report that for this bike's use case, I am not searching for any adjustability in the suspension. This is a motorcycle that I feel very comfortable with. The rear suspension is preload only and non-adjustable as well, so you're not able to dial anything in other than the preload, which really on this bike, that's all you need. You don't really need, you know, fully adjustable KYB forks off of an R1 on a Moto Guzzi. Sure, you could probably put one on there, but wouldn't be the best thing in the world. Speaking of suspension, this is our part of the test here where we have a bit of a bumpier section of tarmac, and Moto Guzzi's doing pretty well here. A little better than I would have expected. It's not turning itself into knots, and it's pretty comfortable. So I think if you were to chuck this thing down a light gravel road, if you needed to get to a campsite or something like that, you could definitely do a whole lot worse than Moto Guzzi, for sure. I mean, there's a guy I saw that took an R6 off-road, so anything is possible, folks. Just have to dream big enough. A little bit of side-to-side action here with the Moto Guzzi. Now, it rides on 190/18 up front and a 150/70/17 out back, if I remember correctly. And it's a bit of a funky tire size. It's very similar to the Royal Enfields. I would have preferred a more conventional tire setup on this thing. I think it would have done it some serious favors, but we'll see how it does over the speed bump. Plops right over it, no problem. Basically, every motorcycle you have a speed bump, just stand up, flip the throttle, and you'll go right over it, not a problem at all. This motorcycle wears its weight very low down, so I actually really enjoy plopping it over little speed bumps like that. It's really no issue at all. Then you get behind some sort of BMW or a Mercedes here, excuse me to all the car people out there who are going to get upset, and then you're stuck going slow. Isn't that a bummer? I think the downside for me is the gearbox on this thing. If I could change one thing already on this ride, I would definitely change the gearbox on this motorcycle. It's definitely a letdown. I'd rate it like a 5 out of 10 tops. It's just, it gets stuck in weird places and you can't find the gear you think you're going to be in. That's a bit of a quirk that I could do without. The braking setup on this thing, pretty good. You're working with a 320 mil Brembo single disc up front, pushed through an axially mounted caliper and a axially mounted master cylinder as well. So not the top shelf braking components, but again, it fits the bike and it fits the bill for what this motorcycle is designed to do. So as you'll see here, let me click it up into third gear and I'll stamp on the brakes uphill right here. Just go ahead and pull down on the lever, and it stops. You know, it does what it needs to do. Lugging it down here from third gear, seeing what it's doing. It's got a lot of low-end torque. This air-cooled 853cc V-twin does a good job of carrying you forward with low torque and kind of that grumbly nature. And again, I gotta say, for an air-cooled V-twin, I really thought it would be more temperamental, a little bit more grumbly, a little bit more Sportster-like, but it actually is pretty zippy. I think this could give the Sportster a run for its money, to be honest. This is a 2-valve engine, so it's not a super hopped-up motor, but overall, a pretty nice little engine. Now, this is not a twisty road motorcycle, so to speak, but I still want to see how it does, trailing into corners. Is it compliant? Is it playing nice? And the answer overall is yes. It kind of does that little party trick that the Royal Enfield does, in that it has a nice front end. It actually does the business it needs to do. And yeah, as you can tell, we've caught another Moto Guzzi in front of us. And this motorcycle does what it needs to do. I like the inclusion of a shift light. You know, it's kind of warning you that you can't really rev it above 4,000 RPM, which is kind of funny because it is a Guzzi and you probably shouldn't be doing that with it. But yeah, I think it's very enjoyable on a light, twisty road like this, kind of sweeping through some corners. It's a very, very nice motorcycle, and you can really get along with it really, really well. This guy, by the way, is not part of the video. I just randomly saw him, so if this man or girl ever watches this video, thanks for doing the double Guzzi with me right here. That's pretty sweet. But yeah, I think given the tires, given the frame, given the engine, you know, you have to really temper your expectations with the Moto Guzzi. This guy's kickstand is going to drag with like 15 degrees of lean. That's not looking good for him. It looks like it's a little farther down than it should be. But overall, the Guzzi is in its element in these kind of conditions. This nice back road, good weather. This is like your PCH bike, man. This is your classic, you know, bop around town kind of bike. This is a fantastic setup for this machine, and it's exactly the type of thing you'd want to be doing with it. I'm really enjoying this. I like the look down, this thin gas tank, the head sticking out of the side. It's a very, very enjoyable motorcycle. Yeah, she's screaming at me a little bit. She doesn't like the whole taking it out to almost a red line. But I am conducting a test Moto Guzzi. I have to see how deep I can brake, how I can barely grab a gear down because your gearbox is so bad and cantankerous. But in reality, you're using this motorcycle not in the way it was intended. You know, let's bring it back down to 3/10 pace. Let's chill out with this thing, huh? Let's grab a couple gears up and let's see how it behaves on a twisty road without riding it in such anger. Because bikes like this, like the Guzzi, like the Bonnevilles, those sort of things, if you ride them in anger, they get upset, you know? They just very clearly tell you that that is not what they're designed to do. Everything starts to kind of flail and fall apart. I did this with the Royal Enfield on-track test, where I very clearly proved that although you can do it, it is very ill-advised, you know? It's very ill-advised for you to go and take a motorcycle like this, bone stock, to the track. It can be done. You should do it because it's a ton of fun, but the motorcycle itself will not really enjoy you doing that with it. It's going to have a lot to say, and it's going to be upset, and it's going to be quite the thing to try to unwrap itself once it ties itself into knots at pace. I'm a little disappointed with the brakes here. They work. I mean, I proved to you guys you can really stamp on the brakes. I'll show you again. Bring it up here. Progressively just, I mean, it'll do it, but it's really not very happy doing it. And am I in first? I don't know. I think I am. Yes, I am. Hard to tell on the Guzzi. Now, I want to see, this is a little bit of a tighter section of pavement here. I just want to see how it is when you really ride it nice and chill, taking it super easy, but still riding within those really nice fundamentals, you know? Really enjoying your ride, but doing it very, very correctly. I think the Guzzi, oh dear, oh geez, that was close. I think the Guzzi really enjoys you know, this kind of pace, this kind of streamlined riding, very easy going. Now, this ride would not be complete if we did not do an acceleration test. We are going to see how this motorcycle performs in a nice little, maybe 3 or 4 gear romp through the park, let's say. We'll try to get it up close to the red line. I don't want to beat on this bike too much. I want to give it some mercy, you know, show it a little bit of mercy. So let's see here. Am I in first? Yes, I am. This gearbox is kind of atrocious, guys. Alrighty. Nobody's coming behind us. We'll try to do a nice little 0 to 60 with it. What do you say, huh? Alright. Okay. Maybe Whitney can put on screen how long that took me to get to 60. I feel like it was a solid 6 seconds or so. Which, hey, is not the worst thing in the world, you know? A 6 second 0 to 60, a lot of car boys would die for those numbers. And here we are in a super lackadaisical, classically styled motorcycle that is just lapping it up and doing it like that. That's really funny. You know, my final opinion on this Guzzi is that it's chock full of character and charm. I've seldom ride motorcycles that I feel like are wholly different or unique from the stuff I've ridden before, and this definitely fits the bill. This is a motorcycle that I feel like is carving its own path. It has carved its own path ever since it was launched in 1967. It's been in continuous production for quite some time, in different iterations, of course, but it's a testament to Guzzi's kind of staying power and the charm that people have over them. Because it's really interesting, because I don't quite know who the Guzzi person is, you know? Like, I kind of know who the Triumph Bonneville guy is, I kind of know who the Sportster guy is, I definitely know who the Royal Enfield guy is, but a Guzzi guy is quite strange, you know? I'm not really sure who a Guzzi rider is exactly and who this bike is for, particularly at the price point. Again, when I come back and ride these motorcycles, you know, like the Bonneville, like the Guzzis, in comparison to the Royal Enfield 650, it's always difficult to make the case that this charm and character is worth an extra $5,000. I'm not sure if it is. You're getting a lot here, and you're getting a bike that is really interesting and cool to ride, but you are still paying for the brand. You want to see that eagle, that bird right there on the side of the tank. It has this kind of allure of a branding to you. That's why you choose a Moto Guzzi. You want something that's a little unique and different, and it only can be done that way. You have to have the transverse V twin. You have to have the character and charm. But I still stand by my opinion, very similar to the Triumph Bonneville, that I'm not sure that it's worth that extra premium. Sitting here in the saddle, it's a beautiful motorcycle, it's really nice to ride, it's a great experience, and there's really nothing quite wrong with it, you know? This is a motorcycle that I could see myself really enjoying as a cruiser bike. It's beautiful, it makes a great sound, it feels like a proper big bike too. It doesn't feel like a, you know, Royal Enfield 650 has that big bike feel, but this thing makes a lot more torque than that bike, and it actually feels proper, if that makes sense. Now, I am still partial to Triumph's 1200 line in their Bonnevilles. That motor is fantastic. It's got that stealth liquid cooling setup, but it doesn't have the charm that this thing has. When you fire this bike up, it feels like a tractor. It feels like a very old school motorcycle, whereas the new Bonnevilles definitely don't feel that way, but they look really cool. It's a much better bike to ride, but this still feels like an authentically old school and cool, charming motorcycle. So honestly, I'm gonna rate the Moto Guzzi an 8.5 out of 10. I'm really enjoying it. I think it's really unique. I think it's really cool. It falls short in a couple key areas for me. The gearbox is a little strange. The brakes leave a teensy bit to be desired. But the engine's character and the feeling of torque that this motor produces overall is a very, very enjoyable experience. And Guzzi people, I don't know, you're like in your own club, in your own special camp. If you see another Guzzi guy, you're usually trying to vibe with them, and you kind of have this kindred, sacred spirit together. But guys, that's gonna wrap up my review on the Moto Guzzi V7 Special. What do you think? Do you own one of these motorcycles? Let me know down in the comments below. If you want to see more videos with this bike, we've got it for another 2 months or so as a loaner motorcycle. So if you want to see it compared against anything, or you want me to do anything with this bike other than modifying, because I can't modify because it's not my motorcycle, just let me know down in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. I will catch you guys in the next one.